A young girl, thrown out by her own family, a billionaire, betrayed and left for dead. Their worlds crash together in the most painful way. She is only trying to survive, while he is struggling to remember who he really is. What happens next will touch your heart and leave you in tears. Sandra. Who got you pregnant? Mrs. Edward, Sandra's stepmother, shouted angrily inside their old cement house in Wiu's village, Abuja. Her voice shook with rage, her face filled with anger. Sandra was already on her knees, her two hands on her head, tears pouring down her cheeks. "Mummy, please," she cried with a broken voice. "A man forced himself on me that night you sent me to buy vegetables for soup." "You're lying," Mrs. Edward shouted again, her eyes full of rage. "You want to bring shame into my house? Our family is respected in this village, but you want to stain our name with disgrace. I wish my husband was still alive to see the kind of disappointment you have become as a daughter." Sandra cried louder. Her two stepsisters, Chika and Kayoma, stood at the doorway with their arms folded, enjoying the drama. Chika hissed and rolled her eyes. "She knows the man. She's just lying as usual." Kayoma added quickly, "Yes. She doesn't want to say his name. She was enjoying herself that night. Now she's pretending." Sandra's lips trembled. "I swear I don't know him. There were two men. It was dark. They covered my eyes and face. I couldn't scream or see their faces." "Shut up," Mrs. Edward barked. "If you don't bring that man here, you will never step foot inside my house again." "Mummy, please," Sandra begged. But Mrs. Edward turned to her daughters. "Kayoma, Chika, push her outside and lock the door. I don't want to see her again until she brings the man that got her pregnant." "Yes, Mummy," they answered. They grabbed Sandra roughly by her arms. She cried, "Please, I'm begging you. Don't throw me out." But they didn't listen. They dragged her to the wooden gate, pushed her out hard, and slammed the door shut. Sandra fell on the dusty ground, crying like a baby. She had nowhere to go. Her real mother had died years ago from cholera, leaving her all alone in the world. People passing by looked at her. Some shook their heads and walked away. Nobody stopped to comfort her. A week passed, and Sandra was still living on the streets. Her clothes were dirty, her hair rough, and her face looked pale and tired. Every day she begged for food at the market. Sometimes people gave her small bread or water. But most times, they insulted her. "Go and meet one of the many men you sleep with," one woman shouted. "Shameless girl," another said, chasing her away with a broom. One afternoon, Sandra sat near a shop in the market. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to herself, "I don't want to die like this. God, help me." With weak steps, she decided to go back to Mrs. Edward's house. When Mrs. Edward saw her at the compound gate, she screamed, "You again? Why are you back here?" Sandra knelt down quickly. "Please, Mummy. I have suffered. I have nowhere to go. I'm begging you. Even if it's to sleep in your kitchen for one night, please allow me." Mrs. Edward's eyes scanned her from head to toe, full of disgust. "You want to stay in my house? Then bring that idiot that got you pregnant. Every parent would do the same thing. Don't blame me. Blame yourself for opening your legs to men in this village." Sandra cried bitterly. "I told you I don't know him. It happened at night. I couldn't see his face." "Then leave my house," Mrs. Edward shouted. Chika and Kayoma rushed out when they heard the shouting. "She knows the man," Chika said quickly. "Yes," Kayoma added, "she's just protecting him." Sandra looked at them with pain. "Why are you doing this to me? What did I ever do to you all? Get out of my house." Mrs. Edward screamed again. Sandra stood up slowly, tears falling. Her feet were swollen from walking long distances. She didn't know where else to go. She had no money. Meanwhile, In the city part of Views, Abuja, a young billionaire named Michael was living a very different life. Michael was a proud owner of a big real estate company. He lived in a beautiful mansion with his mother, Mrs. William. He had no wife or children yet, but he was respected in the city. One sunny afternoon, Michael was driving his black Range Rover on a lonely road in Views village. He was on his way to inspect a land his company wanted to buy. As he drove, he noticed an old car behind him. At first, he thought nothing of it. But when he turned into another road, the car followed. Michael got nervous. He pressed his foot harder on the accelerator. His car sped up, but the car behind him also increased speed. Who are these people? Michael muttered nervously. He pressed harder, but before he knew it, he lost control of the wheel. The Range Rover hit a big tree and somersaulted. The two men in the car behind stopped quickly. They rushed to the wreck. Michael was bleeding, unconscious, but still alive. "He will die anyway," one of them said. They stole his phones, gold wristwatch, and wallet, then jumped back into their car and sped off quickly to avoid being spotted. Soon, villagers gathered around. "Is he dead?" one man asked. Another said, "What a reckless driver. He couldn't even see this big tree." Another added, "Maybe he has bad eyesight and is too stingy to hire a personal driver." Nobody helped him. They just stood and looked. Sandra was on her way back from her stepmother's house when she saw the crowd and smoke rising. She walked quickly towards the people to find out what was happening. She pushed through and saw Michael lying on the ground, covered in blood. Her eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God." She dropped to her knees beside Michael and placed her hand on his chest. His heart was still beating, but weakly. "Please, somebody help me carry him to the hospital," she screamed. Nobody answered. Some turned their backs. "We don't want police trouble," one man said. "Yes, police will likely come and start disturbing us with questions we know nothing about. Carry your problem alone," another muttered. Sandra cried harder. She held Michael's bloody hand tightly. "Please don't die. I don't even know you, but I can't watch you die." She tried to pull him up, but he was too heavy. She screamed louder. "Please. Is there no good person in this village again? Help us." Suddenly, an old man in his 60s driving a delivery van stopped. He came down and said, "I'll put him in my van so we can rush him to the hospital." Sandra's eyes brightened with hope. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." The man lifted Michael into the back of the van. Sandra sat with him, his head on her lap. She kept whispering, "Please, don't die. Please stay alive." The van sped towards the nearest hospital. It was midnight. The city was quiet. Two mean-looking men stepped out of a black car. One of them held Michael's gold wristwatch. The other carried his phone and wallet. They knocked on a tall black gate. A security man opened it for them and they entered. In the backyard stood Thomas, Michael's cousin and the company's financial officer. He had been waiting for them. "You came late," Thomas said, his eyes sharp. He was anxious to hear what had happened, because he was the one who sent them to get rid of Michael. One of the men handed him Michael's phone. He noticed we were following him. He tried to run. Thomas's face changed. "So what happened?" The second man smiled wickedly. "He crashed. His car somersaulted right in front of us. We checked him. He was bleeding badly and almost dead. So we took his wallet that had his means of identification, along with his phone and wristwatch." Thomas's eyes lit up. "So, Michael is gone?" "Yes. We are sure he won't survive," one of them replied. Finally, Thomas whispered, "This company is mine now. I will never be anybody's errand boy again." He laughed loudly. "You did well," he told the men, giving them a lot of cash. "Now leave this town. Don't ever contact me again." They nodded and disappeared into the night. Meanwhile, in Michael's mansion, His mother, Mrs. William, sat on a large couch in the living room, restless. She looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. She stood up and walked to the window, peeking outside again. "No sign of Michael," she whispered. "My son never stays out this late. Where did he go?" She picked up her phone and dialed his number. It was switched off. She tried again. Still off. Her hands began to shake, and her heart beat faster. She sat down slowly and took a deep breath. Something is wrong. Michael never keeps his phone off for this long, she said to herself. She picked up her phone again and called Thomas. "Hello, Thomas." "Yes, Auntie. Good evening." "Evening. Please, is Michael with you?" Thomas paused, then replied, "No, Ma. I haven't seen him. Is he not home?" "No. And his number is off. He hasn't returned." "This is not like him," Mrs. William said with a shaky voice. Thomas acted surprised. Maybe he went out with a friend or something. "No. He would have told me if he was staying out late." "I know my son," Mrs. Williams said. "I'm sure he'll come back soon," Thomas said calmly. Mrs. William thanked him and ended the call, but her heart had no peace. The next morning, Mrs. William had not slept all night. She dressed up early and went straight to her son's company. When she got there, she met a junior staff sweeping the floor. "Good morning, Ma," the young man greeted. "Morning, my son," Mrs. William replied. "Please, when last did you see Michael?" The worker looked surprised. "He came to the office yesterday morning, but he didn't stay long." "Do you know where he went?" she asked quickly. "He only said he had somewhere to go, and would not be back at the office. But he didn't say where." Mrs. Williams' face turned pale. She left quickly and went straight to the police station, her heart beating fast. "Good morning, officers. Please. I want to report. My son is missing," she said. The officer looked up. "When did you last see him?" "Yesterday morning. He left home and didn't return. His colleagues said he left the office in the afternoon and never came back. His phone has been off. I've called all his friends. Nobody has seen him." The officer shook his head. "Madam, it hasn't been 24 hours yet. We cannot declare anyone missing until after 24 hours. But I know my son. He doesn't sleep outside. He never switches off his phone." Mrs. William cried. "Calm down, madam," another officer said in a calm voice. "Sometimes men spend the night at a girlfriend's house. Give it 24 hours. If he doesn't return, come back and we'll begin a search." Mrs. Williams stood still for a moment. Then she slowly turned and walked away, tears filling her eyes. But deep in her heart, she was still hoping her son would come back home. The hospital was noisy and busy that evening when they arrived. "Emergency! Emergency!" nurses shouted as they rushed Michael inside. The kind old man who brought Michael watched as the doctors worked quickly to save his life. 1 hour later, he walked up to Sandra. "I've paid for the hospital bill. I have to go now," he said. Sandra held his hand with tears in her eyes. "Sir, thank you so much. May God bless you." The man nodded, then turned and left quietly. Sandra sat on a bench in the hospital corridor, watching the nurses go in and out of the emergency room. She whispered, "God, please don't let him die. I don't even know him, but he doesn't deserve to die like this." About 6 hours later, the chief doctor came out and called her. "Are you the one that brought in the young man?" Sandra stood up quickly. "Yes, doctor. How is he?" "Come with me," the doctor said. He led her to his office and sat down. "Is he your husband?" the doctor asked. Sandra shook her head. "No, sir. I don't know him. I just saw him after his accident and helped bring him here." The doctor looked serious. "Well, he survived. But there's a problem." Sandra's heart jumped. "Problem? What happened? He has amnesia. That means he has lost his memory. When his car somersaulted, he must have hit his head badly. Sandra gasped. What? Doctor, are you serious? Yes. He will not remember anything. Not his name. Not his family. Nothing, the doctor explained. Sandra covered her mouth with her hands. Jesus. So how will I find his family now? That's the hard part, the doctor said. Until he regains his memory, there's no way to contact anyone. We checked his things, but there was no identification with him. Doctor, will he ever remember? Sandra asked softly. The doctor leaned back. He may. It depends on how bad the brain injury is. It could take months, sometimes a year, or even more. But most patients recover eventually. Sandra looked confused. So what will happen now? The doctor smiled gently. He needs someone to take care of him, feed him, help him move around. You are the only one here. You can take him home when he is stable. Sandra swallowed hard. Me? Take him home? Yes, the doctor said. You'll be allowed to see him when he wakes up. 2 days later, Michael was awake. Sandra walked slowly into his hospital room. Michael was sitting up on the bed, looking around like a lost child. His head was bandaged, and his eyes looked weak. Sandra stepped closer. Sir, you're awake. Thank God. Michael turned and looked at her. His eyes were full of questions. A nurse entered too. Good evening. So, how are you feeling? I don't know, Michael said, holding his head. My head hurts, and I don't remember anything. Do you know your name? The nurse asked. Michael closed his eyes and tried to remember. He pressed his hands on his head. I can't remember. Everything is blank. The nurse turned to Sandra. He will be fine with care. You are free to take him home. With time, he may remember everything. Sandra nodded slowly. Okay, I'll take him. She sat by Michael's side and held his hand gently. Since you don't remember your name, I'll give you one until your memory comes back, she said with a small smile. Michael looked at her. Sandra thought for a while. Your name is Kelvin. Kelvin, he repeated. Yes, until you remember your real name. Michael nodded slowly. Okay, I like it. Sandra's smile faded as she began to think about where she would take him. She had no home. Her stepmother had thrown her out. She took a deep breath and looked down at her stomach. Kelvin, there's something I have to tell you. Please don't get angry, she said softly. I'm listening, he replied. I'm pregnant. But it happened at night, when 2 boys attacked me and forced themselves on me. My stepmother threw me out, because I couldn't tell her who got me pregnant. She said I must bring a man before I can return home. Michael's eyes widened in shock. Sandra continued, Now, I know this sounds crazy, but can you pretend to be the father of my child? Just for now. Just so I can have a roof over my head. I'll tell her you are the one who got me pregnant. Without that, she will never accept me back into the house. Michael looked at her with surprise. He was confused, but he also felt pity for her. You want me to say I'm the one who got you pregnant? He asked gently. Sandra nodded, her eyes full of tears. Please, just pretend. You are the only hope I have, and I will take care of you. I'll feed you, clean your wounds, and I promise I won't leave you. Michael looked at her face closely. He could feel that Sandra was telling the truth. He tapped his fingers slowly and then said, Okay, I'll help you. If pretending to be responsible for your pregnancy helps you, then I'll do it. Sandra smiled through her tears and held his hand. Thank you, Kelvin. Thank you. At the police station, more than 24 hours had passed. Mrs. William returned looking pale, tired, and broken. She had not slept at all. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She walked up to the front desk and whispered, "Good morning, officer. I came back. It's over 24 hours. My son is still missing." The officer nodded. "Okay, madam. We'll open a missing person report." He brought out a form and began asking questions. "Your name?" "William Adora," she replied softly. "Your missing son's name?" "William Michael," she said slowly, her lips shaking. "His dark in complexion. 29 years old. He doesn't stay out late. He's very responsible." The officer nodded and kept writing. "Madam, do you know if your son has any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt him?" Mrs. William frowned and shook her head. "My son? No. Michael is a lovable person. He jokes with his workers. He helps people. Even our neighbors love him. He has no enemies." The officer looked up. "We are asking because this may be a kidnapping case. If you receive any strange calls asking for ransom or threatening you, please come back here immediately." Mrs. Williams' eyes filled with tears. "Officer, please, find my son for me. He's all I have. The only child I have. If anything happens to him, I don't know if I can survive it." "We understand, madam. Please calm down. Go home for now. We have started the search," the officer said gently. Mrs. Williams stood up weakly, wiping her tears with a wrapper as she left the station. Back in Whews Village, Sandra held Michael's hand tightly as they walked slowly toward Mrs. Edwards' house. Michael still had a white bandage wrapped around his head. He walked with a small limp, his body still weak from the accident. Sandra was nervous. She had no idea what would happen next, but she had no choice. They reached the front of the house. Mrs. Edward was outside with Chica and Kayama, spreading stockfish under the sun. As soon as Mrs. Edwards' eyes landed on Sandra and Michael, her smile vanished, and her face turned dark with disgust. Sandra took a deep breath. "Mummy, this is the man that got me pregnant." Mrs. Edwards' eyes widened. "I knew it. So you have been hiding him all this while? Liar. I knew you were not raped that night. You wanted to use that errand I sent you as an excuse to bring shame to our respected family." Chica jumped in. "Mummy, I told you. She has been pretending all along. All those fake cries the other day? She was just acting." Mrs. Edward turned to Michael and looked at him closely. All she saw was a weak man with bandages, standing beside her stepdaughter. So you are the dog that got my stepdaughter pregnant? And you still have the guts to show your face here? No shame at all." Michael kept quiet, his head slightly down. Sandra had warned him earlier, "Don't let them know you lost your memory. Just act like everything is fine." "Did you get her pregnant?" Mrs. Edward barked. Michael looked up slowly. "Yes, Ma. And I'm sorry." Mrs. Edward snapped. "Your apology is not needed. You must marry her. From today, you will take responsibility for her and the baby." Michael replied gently, "Ma, I don't have money. I don't have a house. I can't take care of her yet." Sandra quickly knelt on the ground and held Mrs. Edwards' feet. "Ma, please, he's not well. He has no one. We have nowhere to go. Please, forgive us. Let us stay here." Mrs. Edward kicked Sandra's hands away. "You are mad. Both of you are stupid. So you opened your legs for a lazy, jobless man, and now you want me to suffer for your irresponsible life." She turned to Michael. "Stupid man. You knew you had no future, yet you were sleeping with women. And now you want to push your responsibilities on others." "Ma, please," Michael said weakly. Mrs. Edwards shouted louder. "You either marry her this minute, or both of you leave my house." The house went silent. Chica and Kayoma burst into loud laughter. They were enjoying every bit of the drama. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. Suddenly, Michael said, "Okay, I agree. I will marry her." Sandra's eyes widened in shock. She couldn't believe it. She had only asked Michael to pretend to be the father of her pregnancy, so her stepmother would accept her back. She never asked him to talk about marriage. Mrs. Edward's voice rose sharply. "You want to marry her?" "I will marry her," Michael repeated firmly. Chica and Kyoma laughed even harder. Chica shouted, "Look at him. A useless man with a bandaged head." Kyoma held her stomach, laughing. "He doesn't even look like he has a single penny." Michael looked at them but kept quiet. Mrs. Edward folded her arms. "Since you have agreed to marry her, I will give you both a room to stay." Sandra's face lit up. "Thank you, Mummy." Chica led Michael and Sandra into the small back room, the same room Sandra had used before she was thrown out. Inside, Michael sat down slowly. Sandra touched his shoulder gently. "Thank you, Kelvin, for standing up for me." Michael smiled faintly. "I may not remember my past, but I can see your heart. I will protect you, Sandra." Sandra looked into his eyes and smiled through her tears. "I believe you." 2 months later, after Michael, now known as Kelvin, promised to marry Sandra, life had changed. Sandra was now 3 months pregnant. On a Saturday morning, Mrs. Edward came outside, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist. "Sandra, Kelvin, come outside," she shouted. They rushed out from the small back room. "What is it, Mummy?" Sandra asked. Mrs. Edward folded her arms. "If you two want to continue staying in this house, then it's time to pay Sandra's bride price. Our tradition does not allow an unmarried couple to live together under my roof." Sandra turned to Michael nervously. Michael blinked. "Ma, I don't have money. Please give me some time." Mrs. Edward sighed loudly. "Then carry your things and leave my house. This house is not a charity home for jobless couples." Sandra quickly pulled Michael aside and brought out a small nylon bag. Inside was the little money she had been saving for months. She looked at him with sad eyes. "Please, take this. Use it to pay. If we don't do it, she'll throw us out again." Michael felt terrible. He hated that Sandra was giving up her only savings, but he nodded. "Okay." He handed the money to Mrs. Edward. Mrs. Edward smiled as she counted the notes one by one. "Good," she finally said. "Now you have paid her bride price. She is officially your wife, Kelvin." She clapped her hands together and turned to him. "Go and hustle. Start working and feeding your wife and the baby. Don't come here to disturb me." Kyoma and Chica, who were standing nearby, burst into laughter. Kyoma shouted, "What kind of wedding is this? This has to be the poorest wedding I have ever seen in this village." Sandra heard them but did not respond. She just held her stomach and walked back inside quietly. Meanwhile, at Michael's real estate company in Wiu City, Thomas stood before the staff pretending to be sad. He held the microphone and looked around the large office. "Everyone, it's been 2 months now since our CEO, William Michael, went missing," he said. The office filled with murmurs. "Although we still hope he will return, for now, the company must continue." He paused, then added, "As the financial officer and his cousin, I will take charge of running the company until he comes back." The staff clapped loudly, but some whispered among themselves. One junior worker leaned to another and whispered, "Something about this doesn't feel right." But everyone kept quiet and returned to their desks. Back in the village, one evening Sandra screamed from the room. Her voice was loud and full of pain. "Kelvin, Kelvin, my stomach is hurting me. It's so painful." Kelvin jumped up in panic. He ran outside and shouted, "Mama Edward, please, help us. Sandra is in pain." Mrs. Edward was pounding yam. She turned slowly. "So, am I the nurse?" Kelvin's voice shook. "Please, I don't know any hospital around here. Help me. Let's take her to the nearest one." Mrs. Edward hissed. What kind of man are you? You walk around like a stranger in this village, always acting like you don't know anything." "Please, Ma," Kelvin cried again. "Sandra is in pain." Mrs. Edward dropped her pestle and shouted at her daughters, "Let's go and help them before she loses her life in my house." They rushed Sandra into a tricycle and took her to a small clinic nearby. After 1 hour, the doctor came out with a sad face and said to Kelvin, "She had a miscarriage," the doctor said softly. "Because she was often hungry and didn't eat enough, the baby in her womb did not get the nutrients it needed to survive." Kelvin walked into Sandra's hospital room. She was lying on the bed, her face wet with tears. She whispered weakly, "God, why?" Kelvin sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. He had no words. He just looked down, feeling helpless. Sandra sobbed. "I carried that baby for 3 months. Through hunger, through cold nights, through insults and disrespect. Why would God take my child?" Kelvin wiped her tears slowly. "I'm sorry, Sandra. I'm so sorry." At the hospital hallway, Mrs. Edward heard the news and muttered coldly, "She has finally brought bad luck into this household. I will not stand by and allow it to continue. I must take action to stop it." That's the end of part 1. The story continues in part 2. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, so you'll be the first to know when part 2 drops. Don't miss out.